only one drug is so addictive, 9 out of 10 laboratory rats will use it. And use it. And use it. Until dead. And it can do the same thing to you.
Almost everything we think we know about addiction is wrong. Millions of us know people who are suffering from addiction. And we think we understand why it happens. This is Johan Hari.
Our guest is Johan Hari.
He's written and spoken about the underlying causes of addiction for years.
One of my earliest memories is of trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to. And I was just a little kid, so I didn't really understand why. But as I got older, I realized we had drug addiction in my family. And a few years ago, I was looking at some of the addicts in my life who I love and trying to figure out if there was some way to help them. If you'd asked me when I started doing this research, what causes heroin addiction? I would have said, obviously, heroin addiction is caused by heroin, right? We think that if we kidnapped 20 people off the street, injected them with heroin every day for a month, at the end of that month, they'd all be heroin addicts. For a simple reason. There are chemical hooks in heroin their bodies would start to desperately physically crave. And that's what addiction is. That's why we call it being hooked, right? But I only started to understand what was really going on when I went to Vancouver to interview an incredible man named Professor Bruce Alexander.
This is Professor Bruce Alexander. He explained to us that the theory of addiction we all have in our heads is based on a series of experiments that were done in the early 20th century.
This is the standard experiment of the day.
Take a rat, put it in a cage.
And the cage is this big. There are 2 water sources.
One bottle is just plain water. The other bottle is laced with either heroin or morphine. The rat will always prefer the drug water and will almost always overdose and die. But Professor Alexander had a revelation.
That's a stupid experiment.
He thought, wait a minute. You put the rat alone in an empty cage where it's got nothing that makes life meaningful. It's only got drugs. What would happen if we did this differently? So
I built Rat Park.
He built Rat Park.
It was basically heaven for rats.
They have lots of friends there. Amazing food, tunnels to scamper around in, toys to play with.
And among the other things that rats do,
they have sex.
This is a really social species.
In Rat Park, they had anything a rat could ever want, including great rat sex. But
they still had both water bottles.
The regular water and the drug water. And here's the fascinating thing.
In Rat Park, they don't like the drug water, they don't drink it compulsively, and they never overdose.
So when the rats don't have the things that make life meaningful to them, you get almost 100% compulsive use and overdose. When they do have the things that make life meaningful to a rat, you have no compulsive use and no overdose. And Professor Alexander began to think,
there might be a different story to addiction.
The biological effects of so-called chemical hooks are real, but they're only part of a much larger picture. If you need a cup of coffee in the morning and you've been drinking coffee for most of your adult life, you're familiar with this concept.
Put that coffee down.
There's an experiment that tells us exactly what percentage of your addiction is determined by the chemical hooks.
Kicking the habit.
In the late 1980s, there was this innovation that people were really excited about. Because they thought smoking addiction was entirely about the chemical hooks, they invented something called nicotine patches.
Why didn't you use those nicotine patches I gave you for emergencies, darling? I did.
But only 17% of smokers using the patches stopped.
When are you likely to stop smoking? Is it the week when your wife leaves you, you lose your job, you lose your home? No, I guarantee you, that week, you're gonna smoke more. You're gonna stop smoking when your life is going well. It's not that chemical hooks aren't real. They are. They're just one part of a much bigger picture. If you're in deep pain and you're beaten down and you're cut off from changing your environment, you're gonna seek some kind of relief, right? Even if you have everything in life that money can buy.
Take Elton John, for example. You'd think all of his dreams came true. What more could he want?
I would have an epileptic seizure and turn blue, and people would find me on the floor and, put me to bed. And then 40 minutes later, I'd be snorting another line.
And cocaine wasn't the only thing he was using.
This is how bleak it was. I'd smoke joints, drink a bottle of Johnny Walker. Then I'd stay up for 3 days, go to sleep for a day and a half, get up, and because I was so hungry that I hadn't eaten anything, I'd binge and have like 3 bacon sandwiches, a pot of ice cream, and then I'd throw it up because I became bulimic. And then go and do the whole thing over again.
It was easy for me to get recognition in front of 20,000 people. I loved it. But then I used to come home and I was left with me again.
What if the core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because your life is too painful a place to be?
Because you're traumatized, you're isolated, or beaten down by life, you'll use something that will give you some sense of relief. What if addiction is not primarily caused by your chemical hooks? What if addiction is about your cage?